gown shape now changes completely and becomes a full gathered large A-shaped gown, almost as if the whole dress was cut from a big circle shape. This new gown is called the houppelande. The waistline is now high up under the bosom, usually tied around with a wide and beautiful braided or embroidered sash or a thick leather buckled belt. The neckline is now usually very high, as in polo neck style. Sometimes it comes up so high as to reach the bottom of the half of the ears. The new trend in headwear is called a large padded roll called a bourrelet, with the reticulated cauls worn underneath over the ears. The sleeves now go in the opposite direction again and become extremely long and bell-shaped, beautifully lined and turned back, showing off the gorgeous silk linings, sometimes edged decoratively with braids, pearls and gems, etc. In the next era, the same shaped, large style houppelande gown is still fashionable, but the neckline changes to a lower V-shaped, collared, sometimes with double collars, but still high-waisted. The bell sleeves are now so long that they drag on the floor. It is fashionable to have the edges of the bell sleeve scalloped in all sorts of different patterns called foliations. These sleeves are known as daggered sleeves. The cauls are now also known as bosses and start to change shape again, this time to cone style shapes, giving them a pointed top, and becomes known as the horned headdress. Once again, too scandalous and rebellious in mainstream views. In fact, a society magazine of the time called the Surtees Townley Mysteries quoted in one of their stories, "She is horned like a cow for sin." The veil becomes so long and it is frilled at the front at the edge, making a pretty framed pattern draped over the horns of the headdress. In this era, a lady called Christine de Pizan was an Italian notable court writer at the court of Charles VI of France. She used to write poetry, prose biographies and practical advice for women in a time when women really had no say and no rights. She was the very first lady to advocate for women's rights and give them a voice. She was also a very pious woman and seemed to develop a style of her own. It became famous and fashionable, and maybe this is how she got around to being fashionable and pious at the same time. She managed to merge the horned headdress with an almost nun-like look, with a wrapped wimple and a round horns at the top of the head, covering it with a veil. This specialised headdress was called the atour de gibet. She seemed to remain in the old style bleu, not adopting the houppelande. This may be because of her paintings at the time only show her in the one style of blue bleu, as this. Now took on a different shape, but is still called the houppelande. It is known as the V-shaped houppelande. It is still high-waisted, but it became more fitted at the bodice with an A-line shaped skirt flowing into a train. There is a distinctive V-shape going into the waistline. It is very popular to have fur now, fur-lined neckline, cuffs and bottom hemline. The horns now morphed into a sort of heart-shaped with a softer rounded tops and a distinctive V-shape with a dip at the forehead. This is known as the heart-shaped headdress or the escoffion. Sometimes this headdress is worn with a veil and sometimes just on its own, but a new decoration came in, adorned, taken from the male hat, called the chaperon. It has a cascading tripled ribbon decoration hanging on the top of it called a coxcomb, which is the word for the piece of fluted fresh on top of a cock's head. The headdress also has something called a lyre pipe hanging down from the back of the headdress over the shoulder. It is a long thin tube of material ending in a point and just a fashion statement. The high-waisted V houppelande is still fashionable, although a new normal waisted dress is now becoming very popular. The square neck dress is from the Italian court, coming from a new movement in fashion and the arts, culinary artwork, paintings, etc., called the Renaissance. This word meaning renew or the new was a period in time between approximately the 14th and 17th centuries. This dress style is usually high-waisted, but sometimes a square-fronted bodice now with a silky organza undershift is showing through a split oversleeve with two separate panels, the top being laced to the shoulder, the bottom being laced together or sometimes to the top panel. The sleeves are usually now long over the hands. Highly decorated jewelled collars are fashionable and popular. This fashion is all about the veil now. Extra long silky veils are all the go, fashionable and beautiful. The veil is worn over a new headdress style too, but this is a Burgundian style made popular by Mary Duchess of Burgundy. It is a tall coned headdress called a steeple hennin. The top is cut off and called a truncated hennin. It has a false piece of material pinned onto the front to frame the face called the frontlet, with the hanging side pieces called lappets. Decorative brooches or pins are added to the front, and the headdress is worn far back on the head and has a looped piece of wire on the front, not known if this is used to help hold the headdress on or to gauge the correct position of the headdress. It is highly fashionable now to pluck all the hair from the front of the forehead and the eyebrows. This looks rather hideous to us today, but thought as height of fashion and very sensuous at the time. The V-necked houppelande is still very fashionable now, with tight fitted sleeves this time. Fancy braided or embroidered sashes are wrapped around a high waist. The hair is still plucked from the forehead and the eyebrows, but the truncated hennin is now made even shorter and becomes the flower pot hennin. The veil changes shape completely and dramatically and is set high on wires that stick out from the hennin, having 2 or 3 layers. Flowing veil sitting high on these wires is called the butterfly headdress. There is a metal loop on the front of the headdress as in the previous era. The dress now takes on a different shape to anything that has gone before. The waistline is at normal level again, but the bodice has a definite stiff look to it with a square neckline. The skirt is full and gathered with an extra long train. It is fashionable when these trains are so long to pick them up and tuck them into the back of the waistband, showing off richly embroidered and silk linings with decorative underskirts. The headdress now changed from the hennin style to a hood style. This one has a pointed top and is called the steeple gable. The gable came from the roof shape and it points like a steeple to the heavens. The hood has long side lappets and a dark black veil cradling the hair at the back. The hair is not shown at the front, it is all tucked in and under the hood. At the start of this era, the dress remains much the same style, with a bodice and a trained flowing skirt, but now being slightly held out with many underskirt layers. The square neckline is decorated richly with gems and pearls, etc. The sleeves, however, now take on a completely different look. The under chemise is edged with pretty lace that shows up at the end of the cuffs, but the main sleeve ends in a large bell sleeve that is turned back to show rich linings or fur-lined sleeves. Fur is very fashionable. These false undersleeves are pinned on separately, showing off the chemise through pearl-rimmed slash marks. Slashing is very fashionable in clothing. The headdress still has a hood look, but is now called the box gable because of the back of the head encased in a stiff buckram box shape, with the front of the headdress draped with a front piece called the kennel. It has lappets which are generally pinned up to show off the box shape. A cap or coif is worn underneath to cover the hair. The back of the hood has two pieces of tube style veil at 90 degrees. A new fashion came in which one of these tube veils was generally pinned up onto the top of the box, as so. I can find no information anywhere that says there is any reason for this, just presuming it was a fashion statement, as is one earring or nose ring today. It was Catherine of Aragon that introduced the Spanish farthingale to court and is still fashionable in this period. It is a cone-shaped skirt held out with underskirts made up of several graduating hoops. Farthingale derives loosely from the Spanish word verjugado, which is an English corruption of the word that changed over many years. A decorative, beautiful underskirt is worn under the overdress, which has a train on it. A stiff bodice is now worn over the corset and a false stomacher is pinned on. The stomacher is the false front piece to the bodice. A small, slight overtop or sleeveless jacket is worn over the shoulders, sometimes in the day for modesty or covering a no-neck neckline. It is for warmth also and called a partlet. The false undersleeves on this model are now cone-shaped but still have the slashed look. The hood now was brought over from the French court by Anne Boleyn, which is now rounded at the top, not pointed, and shows the hair off at the front. This is called the French hood. It is beautifully edged with pearls. The two tubular veils go out, and the one tubular veil now encases all the hair.